There are going to be times when you, as the dispatcher, will need to reassign a service appointment from one driver to another. But, before we get into how to look for candidates, let's take a deeper dive into how field service calculates who will be dispatched which service appointments. As we know, field service will route the service based on which vehicle can get to the location the fastest, which vehicle will have the least amount of travel, and which vehicle has the required skill set. Let's look at this first example. Suppose there are 3 drivers sitting in the parking lot at your facility. We want to see what the skills of each of these vehicles are. To get to the skills of the vehicle, we'll hover over the driver's name on the Gantt chart. Then we'll click on the 3 dots and select Details. And, lastly, click on the Related tab. The skills of the vehicle that driver number 1 is in will appear here. Please be aware, although we clicked on driver number 1, these skills are associated with the vehicle that they have signed into on their tablet for their shift. If driver number 1 moves to another vehicle, then the skills of that vehicle would be listed here instead. Let's continue. Shown here, below each vehicle, are the skills of that vehicle. Each vehicle at your facility will receive its own unique skill list and skill level. The skill level is either a 1, 2, or 3. 3 being the highest score and 1 being the lowest score. Let's look at an example. Suppose a call is received that is for a battery replacement. Let's see which vehicle will receive the service appointment. Based on the formula, fastest and least amount of travel miles, all 3 of these vehicles would be considered, because they are all currently parked in the same parking lot. Next, let's look at the vehicle skills. Only one vehicle can do battery replacement. Therefore, the first vehicle will be the one dispatched to the service appointment. Let's look at another example. Again, all 3 vehicles are parked in your facility's parking lot. Suppose a call is received that is for fuel delivery. Let's see which vehicle will receive the service appointment. Again, based on the formula, fastest and least amount of travel time, all 3 of these vehicles would be considered. Next, let's look at the vehicle skills. All 3 vehicles have the skills to do fuel delivery. So, let's drill down farther and look at their grading. The first vehicle has a 2 for fuel delivery. The next 2 vehicles have a 1 for fuel delivery. Based on the grading system of 3 being the highest and 1 being the lowest, the first vehicle will therefore get the service appointment. Although the second 2 vehicles can provide the service, it is more desirable to have the first vehicle provide the service. The higher score for vehicle 1 is what set it apart from the other 2 vehicles. Let's look at another example. For this example, each of the vehicles are out servicing our members. Suppose a call is received that is for a lockout. Let's see which vehicle will receive the service appointment. Based on the skill, vehicle number 1 would be preferred, because their skill is higher than vehicles 2 and 3. But, let's look at which vehicle can get to our member the fastest. Based on this information, vehicle number 3 would be the fastest. Therefore, vehicle number 3 will be dispatched the service appointment. Although, you would think that because vehicle number 1 has a higher score and better suited to do lockouts than vehicle number 3, it is ultimately the total travel time that resulted in vehicle number 3 being dispatched to the lockout call. Although this is a very high-level explanation of how field service is dispatching the service appointments, you need to always keep in mind that field service will route the call based on which vehicle can get to the location the fastest, which vehicle will have the least amount of travel, and which vehicle has the required skill set. Therefore, so that field service can function most efficiently, please verify that each of your vehicles have the skills accurately listed in field service. To update the vehicle skills, contact your contract station representative. Next, let's look at how Get Candidates will work for you. Our first example will show how a simple, straightforward Get Candidates will work. Driver number 2 has received a battery replacement call. After reviewing the details of our member's car, they determine that they can't service our member because they don't have the correct battery in their vehicle. After driver number 2 informs you, you will then start the process of finding candidates. Before moving a service appointment from one driver to another, you must always provide a reason for the move. Right-click on the appointment. Select Change Service Appointment. Select the manual override reason. For our example, the call is being moved due to battery availability. This is letting field service and AAA know why the service appointment was manually overridden. And click on Save Appointment. Now that the reason for the change has been established, you can look for the best candidates to move the service appointment to. To do that, right-click on the breakdown appointment. This time, you will select Get Candidates. You'll notice that there are only 2 candidates that are returned. Since this is a battery replacement call, driver number 1 and number 2 are the only capable vehicles. But, notice that driver number 2 received a higher score than driver number 1. Remember, field service looks for the best candidate, based on which vehicle can get to our member, the fastest, with the least amount of travel, and has the vehicle skill set. As the dispatcher, you now know that although driver number 2 has a higher score than driver number 1, you will need to dispatch the call to driver number 1 because driver number 2 doesn't have the battery in their vehicle. To do so, we'll click on driver number 1. And then we'll click on the Schedule button. Notice, the service appointment will move to driver number 1 on the Gantt chart. Let's look at another example. For this example, a passenger tow call was dispatched to driver number 4. After the driver has received the service appointment and contacted our member, it is determined that our member's vehicle has 3 flat tires. Driver number 4's vehicle is not capable of towing a vehicle with 3 flat tires. A flatbed is required. This is where you, as the dispatcher, will need to reassign the call to the appropriate vehicle. Let's see how this is done. Before moving a service appointment from one driver to another, you must always provide a reason for the move. Right-click on the breakdown appointment. Select Change Service Appointment. Select the manual override reason. For our example, the call requires a flatbed. This is letting field service and AAA know why the service appointment was manually overridden. Lastly, click on Save Appointment. Now that the reason for the change has been established, you can look for the best candidates to move the service appointment to. To do that, right-click on the breakdown appointment. This time, you will select Get Candidates. You'll notice that there are only 2 candidates that are returned. Drivers number 1 and number 2 are in vehicles that are not capable of towing, therefore, they are not considered in the list of candidates. We already know that driver number 4 cannot perform the tow, because there are 3 flat tires, and a flatbed is required. But, notice that driver number 4 received a higher score than driver number 3. Remember, field service looks for the best candidate, based on which vehicle can get to our member, the fastest, with the least amount of travel, and has the vehicle skill set. Since this was originally placed as a passenger tow call, driver number 4 was chosen over driver number 3. Had this been placed as a flatbed call, then driver number 3 would have been dispatched the call. As the dispatcher, you now know that although driver number 4 has a higher score than driver number 3, you will need to dispatch the call to driver number 3 because they are in a flatbed. To do so, we'll click on driver number 3. And then we'll click on the Schedule button. Notice, the service appointment will get dispatched to driver number 3. Let's look at another example. This next example will demonstrate what to do in the event that a driver arrives on location, but is unable to service our member due to low clearance requirements. Driver number 4 arrives on location to find that their vehicle will not fit into the structure. You, as the dispatcher, will need to reassign this call to a vehicle that will fit. First, let's explain why we want to manually override this call. Now, we'll get candidates. You'll notice that there were no candidates found for this service appointment. Therefore, What you must do next is, click on the Hide Slots button. You must switch the policy which is being used to search for candidates. Why? Because, remember, field service will route the service based on which vehicle can get to the location the fastest and with the least amount of travel. You want to switch from the default policy of within PTA to no PTA. Why? Because, using the within PTA policy, we'll look for only vehicles that can be at the breakdown location within the promised time of arrival. Since there are no vehicles that meet that criteria, you now need to broaden your search and look for vehicles that can get to the breakdown location, but won't meet the PTA. Let's see what this means. The red line indicates the current time. Drivers number 1 and number 2 are already on current calls. Therefore, they wouldn't be able to make the low clearance call within the promised time of arrival. Driver number 3, although not currently on a call, wouldn't be able to make the low clearance call within the promised time of arrival either. Therefore, switching to no PTA would search for candidates that could get to the low clearance call, but not within the promised time of arrival. Let's switch to no PTA and search for candidates. Notice now that all 4 vehicles are an option. But, because of the low clearance, only vehicles 1 and 2 can be selected. Vehicle number 1 already has a scheduled service appointment after their break. Yet, vehicle number 2 doesn't have an appointment after their current one. The ranking of vehicle number 2 is therefore higher than vehicle number 1. We'll select vehicle number 2 to get the low clearance call. And, click on the Schedule button. Notice that the call will now be scheduled to driver number 2. The service appointment status will go from on location to scheduled. As soon as driver number 2 has completed their current call, then they will be dispatched the low clearance call. Please be aware, the service appointment will become in jeopardy, because driver number 2 will not be able to meet the promised time of arrival. Remember, when we used the within PTA policy, there weren't any candidates, so we had to use the no PTA policy to find candidates. As the dispatcher, you will need to contact our member and keep them updated on the driver's status. Because driver number 2 will not see the low clearance call until after he clears his current call. Before we complete the Get Candidates topic, there are a few items that need to be mentioned. For tow calls, you can only right-click on the breakdown appointment to get candidates. Notice, when you right-click on the tow appointment, Get Candidates is not an option. If you forget to add the reason for moving a call from one driver to another, then you will receive a notification that you have a message. When you click on the envelope, you will be notified of the requirement to add the reason for the move. And, lastly, field service will keep a record of who moved the service appointment and what the reasoning was. In summary, why use Get Candidates? Because Get Candidates will look for the best vehicle, based on the vehicle's location and vehicle skills. When you click on the Schedule button, field service will sync with the driver's tablets, resulting in field service functioning more efficiently. Remember, the capability of the driver is based on the skills of the vehicle they are driving. Therefore, it is your responsibility to always confirm that the vehicle's skills are up to date. It is also important that the drivers are consistently updating their status on their tablets so field service knows their location as well as their current status. Keeping vehicle skills and driver statuses updated will help to optimize the efficiency of field service for dispatching calls to the best candidates.